For to one is given through the Spirit the utterance of wisdom, to another the utterance of knowledge according to the same Spirit, to another faith by the same Spirit, to another gifts of healing by the one Spirit, to another the working of miracles, to another prophecy, to another the ability to distinguish between spirits, to another various kinds of tongues, to another the interpretation of tongues. All these are empowered by one and the same Spirit, who portions to each one individually as he wills. The Spirit of God gives the gifts as he wills. We don't get to like raise your hand. You're not like in line at the cafe and we get to raise our line. I'll take discerning between spirits, I'll take some wisdom over here, right? No, he gives us those gifts as he wills, for our good and for the good of the body of Christ. Let me pick up in verse 27 and forward. The second time in the same chapter, Paul gives us gifts of lift. And really, listen to these, and again, hear the different types: the shepherding, the service, and then the gifts of faith. Paul continues in verse 27. Now, you are the body of Christ and individually members of it. And God has appointed in the church first apostles, second prophets, third teachers, then miracles, then gifts of healing, helping, administrating, and various kinds of tongues. Are all apostles? Are all prophets? Are all teachers? Do all work miracles? Do all possess gifts of healing? Do all speak in tongues? Do all interpret? Of course, the answer to all of those questions is no. So the Spirit of God gives us gifts, and he doesn't give us all the gifts. This is why there is one Jesus Christ who has all of the gifts, and then we collectively are the body of Christ. And so we need one another. We need the gifts that he's given to those around us. So gifts of shepherding, gifts of serving, and gifts of faith. Let me run down a little rabbit trail here through the gifts of faith, because my hunch is that there's some questions probably stirring in your mind. What do we do with some of those gifts? They sound a little odd. Let me first address this. What do we make of the miraculous gifts? And I'll just start here by saying there's differing opinions by godly and faithful Christians on this matter. There are some Christians who believe that God gave the early church miraculous gifts to kind of birth the church, to explode the church right out of the gate. And then after what we call the apostolic age, after the first generation passes, then those gifts could go away. And that's possible. We here at New Life would hold a position where we believe actually those gifts continue on. We believe that God continues to work miraculously. Now you might be saying, but I haven't seen that. And I would answer that in a couple ways. One is, I do think God works differently in different cultures. We live in a culture that is, if not immune from the supernatural, at least resistant to the supernatural. We give answers of how things might have happened. And it's hard to disentangle the supernatural sometimes. Someone goes to the doctor and is getting help, and then they get better. Well, was it the doctor? Was it God? Was it God using the doctor? It's hard to disentangle these things. It's hard for God to kind of fully get the credit, fully get the glory. But we believe God continues to work miraculously. We believe that we can pray for God to intervene miraculously, that God is not hindered by our expectations, and that God can work miraculously without doctors. God can use doctors to work miraculously. And ultimately, God will work miraculously in the life of every believer. All will be healed ultimately in the new heavens and the new earth. And we believe God continues to work that way here. Just this week, we've been praying for one of our son's friend's dad who had a medical condition, and it looked like this was going to be something that was with him for a very long time, is what the doctors said. And then overnight, he woke up and it was completely gone this week. Completely gone. Amazing. And I would say, I believe God intervened. Now, maybe God intervened through the doctors, but it looked like God intervened. The doctors didn't expect this to happen. I also think that God works miraculously and tends to work miraculously more in places where the clarity of his glory is made manifest. And so, for instance, in the global south, I think that God tends to work more miraculously in the developing world. So obviously, you might know this. We have an entwined relationship with a ministry in India that we love to support, and we go there every year. And I'll tell you a story from our past trip just a few weeks ago, but it's a story that represents many, many of these stories. And so this pastor shares about how he came to faith. He grew up in a radical Hindu home, worshiping the Hindu gods. His mother became deathly ill. And they couldn't figure out what was going on with her. They took her to a doctor. The doctor couldn't cure her. They began to take her to different Hindu temples. And at each place, she was not healed. And ultimately, then a Christian family said, come to us, come visit our church with us. We worship the one true God, and we believe he can heal you. And sure enough, God did. Miraculously intervened. The woman was healed. Her entire family comes to faith. And now her son is serving as a pastor. We believe that God works miraculously, and he does so for the benefit of his church, and he does so for his own glory.